New York City, 1976. Author and researcher Zachariah Sitchin publishes his book, The 12th Planet, introducing his revolutionary interpretation of the Anunnaki deities. After studying Sumerian cuneiform tablets for 30 years, he asserts that these so-called Sumerian gods were, in fact, extraterrestrials that landed on Earth in Mesopotamia more than 450,000 years ago. Right?
Yep, that's right. Good old Zachariah got me too. I bought his books probably, I'm gonna start reading his shit. 1989, somewhere around 89, 90, 91. That's when I started copying his books. And I just knew I had stumbled upon the truth. And I was the biggest Zachariah Sitchin fan for probably a decade of my life, until I actually ran into the real truth. So for those of you who think Zachariah, Dr. York's master teacher when it comes to this Anunnaki shit, do you think this man actually knows what he's talking about? Let's take a look. Who is Zachariah Sitchin?
Well, Zachariah Sitchin was, I believe he was lived in Palestine, then later Israel, then moved to New York. But I think he got an economics degree in London, and then became the head of a shipping company. So he's not like a trained Sumerologist. He didn't actually professionally study any of the stuff he's talking about in his books. But, you know, he was an amateur who's interested in the subject, and I think that that's great. As far as his Sumerian, he taught himself.
According to Sitchin's translations, the Anunnaki both created human beings and also had a part in mankind's downfall.
But when you teach yourself, okay, sometimes you don't always know what you're supposed to study, okay? So personally, looking at his translations and things like that, I think he kind of did a half-assed job of teaching himself, because he doesn't take certain things into account that you would want to take into account when you're studying Sumerian.
Zachariah Sitchin wrote a number of well-received books on the Anunnaki.
But the word Anunnaki isn't the original word,
which he, quite controversially, believed actually exists in our solar system.
The Anunnaki is just an Akkadian translation of Anunna.
His theory was they upgraded the human race and used them as sort of a slave species.
And it's Anunna that he's supposed to be looking at.
Ain't that a bitch? What?
Zachariah Sitchin's hypothesis that the Anunnaki came to Earth to mine gold and then created humans to perform the task was both bold and controversial.
Anunnaki actually isn't Sumerian at all.
Damn.
Needless to say, it was not embraced by mainstream scholars.
I have personally found the writings of Sitchin very frustrating. It's very hard to follow his trail because he just doesn't cite sources. Even if he cites a source, for instance, an ancient text, he doesn't give you sort of the chapter and verse. He doesn't give you the tablet numbers, the line numbers, and whatnot. Even when he does bother to mention a specific source, and he's always using a known translation, except when he starts putting the Anunnaki on Nibiru as if that was their home planet or things like that. He's not using translations for that. He's just making that part up. But when he actually does cite a translation, he even doesn't give you the page numbers half the time. It's just really frustrating as a scholar, because what scholars do is they write in such a way that you can follow what they're doing so that you can review it, you can follow the argument and interact with it. Sitchin just makes that a very, very difficult task. And I have to look at it and say, it's either really lazy or he doesn't want you to be able to check up on him. It's one or the other.
Right?
We actually have dictionaries from ancient Mesopotamia. The ancient Mesopotamian scribes created dictionaries. Now, they have all kinds of lexical lists. That's just sometimes groupings of common words in their language. But some of them have an inventory of the word meanings, right? And it tells you in the languages that they used what the words meant. And he doesn't seem to avail himself of that information when he makes his translations. Like, for example, when he translated the word Anunnaki, right? Now, what did I told you that the word means of royal seed, okay? But he translates it to mean from heaven to earth came.
So this is where you have to pay close attention. The translation of Anunnaki, meaning those who from heaven came, is the mistranslation of Zachariah Sitchin and Zachariah Sitchin alone. So anyone who subsequently follows behind him and uses that translation is undoubtedly regurgitating and plagiarizing Zachariah Sitchin's work. Everyone from Dr. York to Billy Carson to Timu Billy Carson to this brother right here.
The word Anunnaki deals with explanation more so than it deals with a certain being or certain deity. It just means from heaven they came. So that's what the word Anunnaki means. From heaven they came.
Right? The word Anunnaki, right? Now, what did I told you that the word means of royal seed, okay? But he translates it to mean from heaven to earth came, right? Breaking down Anunnaki into components, and basically I think he just broke them into components, opened up a Sumerian dictionary, and then looked for those words, not really understanding the grammar of words or anything like that. So Anu, I think he says, means the heaven, right? Which is the god Anu, you know, who represents the sky. And Ki is the word for earth, representing the earth. And then Na he interprets as coming, to come. So heaven came to earth, something like that. But he's just like breaking it up into parts based on just whatever, you know, he wanted, and then looking up the individual words in the dictionary and then saying it means that without understanding how it was formed, or even understanding that the word Anunnaki isn't the original word, that Anunnaki is just an Akkadian translation of Anunna, and it's Anunna that he's supposed to be looking at. Anunnaki actually isn't Sumerian at all. It's Akkadian. And Anunna is Sumerian. But yeah, so
it appears Zachariah wasn't qualified and got it wrong, and everyone since him has regurgitated what he has to say, including Dr. York, and it matriculated its way into the black community, and now we're stuck with the Anunnaki, Billy Carson, and Timu Billy Carson.
Right?
This not looking good for old
Northern
Zachariah.
Iraq.
Shit.
Along the east bank of the
Dr.
Tigris
York.
River, opposite the city of Mosul,
Old
lie
Billy
the ruins
Carson.
of the ancient city of
Shit.
Nineveh, a
Timu Billy
place
Carson.
originally inhabited by
Yo,
the
all got
Sumerians
y'all
of
flow from this
Mesopotamia.
nigga. And he was wrong.
and Sitchin's word meanings and translations of Sumerian and Mesopotamian words are not consistent with the Mesopotamian bilingual dictionaries produced by Akkadian scribes. The Akkadian scribes are saying, here's the word, what it means in Sumerian, and here's an Akkadian word for it, and so on. He doesn't use that. If he talks about a word meaning whatever in Sumerian, and it never shows up in that language with that meaning, then he's probably wrong. In other words, he gives meanings sometimes to words, not in the case of Anunnaki, but sometimes he gives meanings to words that aren't even a meaning that you can find in any of the dictionaries, right? So that's why I would say he's a bit untrustworthy in that regard.
In 1842, British archaeologist Austin Henry Layard unearthed the ruins of the Great Library of Ashurbanipal, a royal archive containing thousands of clay tablets with cuneiform inscriptions. Dating to 3000 BC, the messages carved into stone are considered to be the world's first written accounts. Sumerian tablets are probably one of the oldest form of written record that we have. They've been translated, and they tell exciting stories about how gods intermingled with human beings and actually had a hand in the creation of human beings. Whether or not it's just mythology, or if it's fact, no one really knows.
Millions of people out there who really believe that Zachariah Sitchin has really figured out the real truth about the Sumerian literature and about the Anunnaki. And yet in my case, I know that he did not translate things correctly, and his description of the Nibiruans and the Anunnaki is not correct. Elements of it are correct. And I've studied the Enuma Elish, which is the sacred scriptures from which this comes from. And so I knew that he was wrong, but there were still a lot of problems out there in the field with saying what you really think about Sitchin.
Great storyteller, but he wasn't qualified.
Ancient chronicles of sky beings creating human life are common in early cultures found all over the world. But while mainstream scholars often dismiss this evidence
because it's
A lot of these alternative history video channels get tons of views, lots of subscribers, but you have to wonder, does everyone who watches them believe it?
You think that you were subconsciously holding back and we just blew through it and
I
didn't
was
get to it?
consciously holding back.
Okay, well, let's
Because
talk
in
about
my
it.
case, as a publisher, I'm one of the people who published Zachariah Sitchin. And I just want to say that I totally value this man's work and I have great respect for him. It's just that in this critical area, he exaggerated things.
right?
I mean, I watch them. I watch them for my own reasons because sometimes I want to debunk them, but sometimes people watch them for entertainment reasons, right? And so it doesn't necessarily, I hope, mean that every single person that watches them believes it. Maybe a large number of them are just kind of entertained by it.
Right?
As the world burns around you,
think this shit is conscious.
you will have to make a choice.
I think this shit is subconscious.
Is it us